Hello and welcome to the third episode of the City of Good Sports podcast. I'm Richard Miller. I was originally planning on doing some interviews for today's episode, but due to scheduling conflicts with work and some of the people I wanted to interview, I thought it was a better fit to just do another solo episode today. So I wanted to break it down in three segments. The first being college basketball, the second being the Bills game against the Bucks, and the vintage Josh Allen game and the Keon Coleman saga, everything Bills related. And then the third one will be about Shedeur Sanders and his first ever NFL game with the Browns, as well as the circumstances kind of surrounding that. So we're going to start off with college basketball. College basketball is in a good state in Western New York. St. Bonaventure's 4-0, Damon's 4-0, Syracuse is 3-0, and UB is also 4-0. But I do want to start with Damon. I interviewed Mike McDonald in my last episode. And they recently hosted a tournament called the East Coast Challenge. There were four D2 teams that competed: Felician University, Roberts Wesleyan University, and St. Anselm, and of course Damon, who hosted it. Damon went 2-0 in the tournament. St. Anselm and Felician both had one loss to Damon and one win against Robert Wesleyan, who went 0-2 in the tournament. I attended Saturday's games, which were Roberts Wesleyan versus Felician and Damon versus St. Anselm, and it was a good bang for my buck. It was a great experience. I watched two great basketball games, so I'm just going to go ahead and recap those to start off my episode. The first game was between Roberts Wesleyan and Felician. Roberts Wesleyan is a school in Rochester. Felician is a school in Jersey, but this game had a lot of Buffalo flavor to it, simply due to the fact that there were starters on both teams that I went to school with. Both Keontae Carter off of Wesleyan and Noah Hutchins off of Felician. I went to school with at the Park School of Buffalo. And there was a lot of Park School flavor because there was just a lot of alumni, a lot of people associated with the school, a lot of coaches that were in attendance at this game. So I ran into people that I haven't seen in 4 or 5 years. So it was definitely a little bit of, a reunion for me. It was definitely cool to run into people I haven't seen in a while. So Felician won this game 95-90. And the main story of this game was the fouls. There were 45 total fouls, 24 from Felician and 21 from Roberts Wesleyan. And despite this, nobody fouled out. Each team had 4 guys with 4 fouls, yet nobody fouled out. So this game starts out basically by Keontae Carter, or as people call him, Ticket. He was kind of playing as the primary ball handler, like kind of the lead guard, but he's more of like I don't know if he's a point forward, point shooting guard, but he's the primary ball handler for the team. He comes out, gets 2 early assists to Trey Kleitz and Jordan Brown on threes, and Wesleyan shot good from 3 in this game. They were 10-23, 43.5% as a team, right? So they get off to an early lead of 11-4. And then somewhere after that run, it just became really physical. There was just a ton of fouls, a ton of reaching, a ton of hacking. Carter was getting double teamed a lot. And then, Felician starts to get back into the game and even lead for a lot of it. There were a lot of lead changes in the first half. And you start to notice there are some ballers on their team. One guy that really stood out to me was number 3, Tavion Pullock. But overall, Pullock had 23 points. Number 2, Jared White, he had 25 points. Number 11, Jeremiah Anderson, had 24 points. So this Felician team has some guys who could really score the basketball. Not to mention, they just had an obvious size advantage over Roberts Wesleyan. They were killing them in the paint. They won the points in the paint battle 52-28. So this was a classic battle of post play versus perimeter play. Now, Tristan Harcourt, the big man from Felician, had 14 rebounds. No one on Roberts Wesleyan even came close to having that many rebounds. Surprisingly, as a team, Felician only out-rebounded them by 1, which when I saw that on the box score, I was a little surprised by that because it felt like they were getting more boards than them. So anyway, the first half ends, right? it's a close game. Felician is leading 47-45. When the second half starts, this is when you really start to see that Roberts Wesleyan is just kind of outmatched. Like Felician just has a better team, and all due respect, because I am looking forward to watching and covering Wesleyan for the rest of the year. Felician just looked like a better team that game. You know, they had more size, they had more skill, and they had more scoring. And in the start of the second half, Felician is just flat out outplaying them. You know, Wesleyan is getting outmatched. And with Felician, they just had more of a flow to their offense. They had more guys who could create their own bucket. They were just passing to all the right shots. And at the same time, on defense, they were just, you know, doing little side swipes, you know, a lot of push-offs, a lot of reach-ins. It was kind of like the OKC Thunder, to be honest. But then Roberts Wesleyan subs Carter out. And after this, Felician blows the lead up to 15. And you're like, oh, this game might be over. And from that point, it was just a lot of catch up. So once they sub Keandre Carter back in, Ticket, he starts doing, speaking of the Thunder, he starts doing a little bit of a Shea impression. Every 2 seconds you hear, now at the line, Keandre Carter. He ended up shooting 13 free throws this game, but he kind of had to, where in the first half, they were doubling him and hacking him pretty much the entire game. In the first half, he was kind of trying to finish through contact, you know, doing a lot of drives and kicks. And it was working for the most part because, as I mentioned, Felician shot over 43% from three. But in order to claw back into this game, they start drawing a lot of fouls. And at the same time, they're fouling on the other end. So it just kind of becomes this game of free throws. And eventually Felician pulls out the win 95-90. But it was just call after call in the second half. But I did walk out of the game. I was very impressed by Ticket, and I was very impressed by the big three on Felician. And actually, both Tavion Pullock and Keandre Carter had 25 points in the first game and 23 points in the second game, and are averaging 24 points on the year. That's just something I found interesting. And with Noah Hutchins, he was kind of being a little bit of a defensive anchor and kind of setting this tone defensively. He was playing very physically. He had 4 rebounds and 3 assists. So while he didn't necessarily find a shot this game, he was certainly contributing. Honestly, more than anything, that game was won at the line and it was lost at the line. And Roberts Wesleyan got back into the game at the line, but overall as a team, they were only 20 of 32. That's a little over 62%. Trey Clydes, who's a hell of a shooter, he went 4 or 5 from 3, but he went 0 of 5 from the line. He was fouled on a 3-pointer and missed all 3 free throws. So, you know, I know Coach probably has them doing a ton of free throw drills, probably a suicide for every missed free throw. But I still think these teams aren't in the same conference. But if they were to play, say, postseason-wise, it will be a very competitive, very physical game with a highly motivated Roberts Wesleyan team and a highly motivated Felician team. Now let's get to the second game. Speaking of motivated, Damon versus St. Anselm. St. Anselm came into this game wanting to upset Damon in Buffalo, and you could tell. Damon's a team that blows out teams regularly, right? St. Anselm was determined to not let that happen. And this game, Damon ended up winning it 80-63. But that's not reflective of how the game went. This was a very defensive game. Roberts Wesleyan versus Felician was a very physical game, but it was an offensive game. It was 95-90. This was a defensive game at heart. And St. Anselm actually won the turnover battle 17-11. And there was the fair share of fouls this game, including a very controversial late blocking foul call on Ben Bill which nearly got the ref booed out of the arena. But it was a very defensive game. In addition to winning the turnover battle, they also won the bench battle. They outscored them 32-13 in terms of points off the bench, and it was primarily led by Isaiah Griffin and Hayden Johns, who were arguably the two best players of the game. I mean, Morissette looked really good, but a lot of their offensive attack came from Griffin and Johns. So through the first half, Damon kind of, they set the tone. It was very clear that Damon never really let their pulse off of the game. Like, they would get up to 10, but it never got much above 10. It would always hover around 10. It would get a little below it every once in a while. And it was just a well-balanced attack. Zach Filipkowski, this was one of the best games I've seen from him. But it was just typical Damon, team basketball. Everyone pretty much showed up for them. The second half starts. All of a sudden, that lead starts to chip. And there's 7 minutes left, and St. Anselm is right in this game. But eventually, Damon does what Damon does best, and they go on a run, and they take the game away. And that's something Damon's really good at. Damon is really good at making you think you could be in the game with them and then just pulling away at the end. I saw it last year in the postseason game against CSI. You may think you could compete with Damon, but once they're really determined to get the win, they will do anything in their power to get the win. One thing that really held Damon back, and he had a good game, he had 13, 8, and 6, point forward, but as Coach McDonald said about Justin Hemphill, sometimes he plays like, you got to be current Josh Allen, don't be young Josh Allen. And he had 7 turnovers this game. I do have to mention, even though they lost the bench battle in 19 minutes, Phil Nwugwo had 11 points and 7 rebounds, 13 from Ben Bill, 12 from Justin Glover. So it's that kind of team basketball that we're used to Damon playing. And this is a team that could beat a lot of D1 teams. They showed it when they beat UB last year, and I think this year they have a better team than last year. I think they're certainly going to compete for a national title, and they have a big game against Fairmont State on Tuesday. So, I will be excited to cover Damon throughout the rest of the year. But as I talked about young Josh Allen versus current Josh Allen, that provides us a perfect segue to this, the full Josh Allen experience that we witnessed in this Bills-Bucks game. Prior to this matchup against the Buccaneers, there were 2 main headlines surrounding the Bills. The first was obviously that abysmal performance against the Dolphins last week, which I didn't cover on the podcast. I'm glad I didn't cover it, but there is one parallel between the 2 games, which I'll get into later. And secondly, in a more prominent story, is Keon Coleman was a healthy scratch for this game. He missed Friday's team meeting. The Bills are heavy on team culture and no-nonsense policies. Keon Coleman hasn't had the best season. He's only in his second year. He's still on his rookie deal. So he sat, and honestly, you didn't even really notice it. Tyrell Shavers stepped up, and you've seen flashes from Shavers. Shavers is a guy who wants the opportunity badly. And per Next Gen stats, Shavers ranked number 1 among qualifying receivers in target separation at 6.0 for the entire week, the entire NFL. And we know Keon Coleman, one of the main things he struggles with is separation. Shakir honestly was silent this week. I didn't even notice much of Shakir, but, Gabe Davis, who they just activated, obviously remember Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox, it wasn't the typical crew. I mean, James Cook obviously had a great game. Ty Johnson was involved in the passing game, but more than anything, it was the Josh Allen experience in a nutshell. So he started the game with one of the worst interceptions I've seen ever. Just a boneheaded play. And this is following a trend of him just turning the ball over more and more. And at this point, I was like, where is the MVP Josh Allen? But he quickly showed me why he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That 40-yard escape and dot to Tyrell Shavers, that was just one of the 3 passing touchdowns he had, all of which were over 25 yards. In addition to the 3 passing touchdowns, he had 3 rushing touchdowns. He had 317 passing yards, 40 rushing yards, 357 total yards, 6 total TDs. The first QB ever to have 3 passing touchdowns of over 25 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. But he did have 2 interceptions. So you're reminded of how great Josh Allen is, but how prone he is to mistakes. Nonetheless, the offense clicked, and it didn't seem to miss a beat without Coleman. Now, I want to like Coleman, and I definitely liked him when he first got drafted, but there's a team culture and there's expected standards you have to meet if you want to be on a Super Bowl competing team. Another guy we just picked up, Mecole Hardman, he started the game with a 61-yard kickoff return. Great first impression. Fumbles on a punt return. So, a lot of Chiefs fans say that's the Mecole Hardman experience, but I think I would like to see him be used in special teams despite the fumble, just based off of pure speed. The speed element is something that is crucial. I would love to see Shavers get an enhanced role in the offense. But nonetheless, as long as we have Josh Allen, our offense is set. Special teams, who's going to be the full-time return guy, that's still up in the air. It could be Hardman, it could be Codrington, it could be a lot of people. But special teams look decent besides the fumble. And before I get into fully attacking the defense, Cole Bishop is becoming a star in front of our eyes. He had another interception today, and he's on a run of 2 or 3 just fantastic games. And it's something we always needed. We haven't had a star safety since probably about 5 years ago version of Jordan Poyer in Mike High. So for him to step up and be the lead safety is definitely something that has been pleasantly surprising as a Bills fan. However, the one thing that makes me question if we could win a Super Bowl is this run defense. They are without Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving was out for today. Their third string running back, Sean Tucker, comes in. 140 yards and 3 touchdowns, and this is right after Devon Achane completely obliterated our run defense. This is a pattern, and it's a pattern that needs to be fixed. I don't know if we need to restructure the defense entirely. Even getting all these new D tackles, I was excited about it. I mean, Deion Walker is a big guy. We haven't had someone necessarily with his build and power, and he's a rookie. I'll give him grace. But there's more to it than just being a big guy. Our linebackers are still undersized. I like Bernard. I like Milano. But at some point, you have to start questioning how we can make this run defense better, because we can't just give up 200 rushing yards every week. There's no way we can win a Super Bowl like that. So regardless of Josh, regardless of Keon, regardless of everything else, the main problem with the Buffalo Bills is run defense. It always has been, and until it is fixed, it always will be. It'll be the thing that comes back to bite us. And if something else comes back to bite us, then hey. But if I had to place my bet on the reason we get eliminated from the playoffs this year, it might be the Chiefs. It might be Patrick Mahomes. It might be the pass defense. But I have a feeling it's going to be that run defense. So for the final segment of my episode, we're going to travel about 3 hours southwest along Lake Erie and go to the Cleveland, Ohio, where we'll talk about Shedeur Sanders, who played in his first ever NFL game with the Cleveland Browns. So he was put in the second half after Dillon Gabriel went out with concussion protocol. And his performance was bad. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a bad game from Shedeur Sanders. He was 4 of 16 and he had an interception. But the reason as to, and I don't even want to be one of these people that's like, but whatever, but first year quarterbacks don't get enough grace as is. Shedeur Sanders doesn't give enough grace at all. This was a guy that fell to the 5th round for who knows why. Kevin Stefanski said that this was his first time ever playing with the starter since he was drafted. And Kevin Stefanski has been clearly rooting for Shedeur to fail. It's so blatant and it's so obvious, to the point where offensive lineman Wyatt Teller literally came out and said, I think I've heard his cadence maybe like 2 or 3 times. And he went on to say, but he played his heart out, and he did play his heart out. The first possession, terrible. Immediate interception. Second possession, he was pressured. He was flat out blitzed. He was blitzed the entire second half. The Ravens blitzed him the entire second half. And he has an offensive line that doesn't know his cadence, that he's not in tune with because he hasn't played any snaps with them. He has wide receivers that he hasn't played any snaps with. He has tight ends that he hasn't played any snaps with. Who's going to have a good game under those circumstances, if we're really being honest? In your first ever game to get thrown into the fire like that? That's impossible. You have to be one of the greatest ever to even muster up a good performance under those circumstances. So, yeah, he was 4 of 16. Yeah, he had 1 interception. Stats don't tell the full story. And those stats tell a lot of the story of, oh, this was a bad game. And I guess it was a bad game. But after those first 2 possessions, right, he was still getting blitzed. The second possession, I don't think he even got a throw off. But he started finding a lot of guys. There were a lot of drops. There was a touchdown that was dropped. And you've seen people where he's getting flat out blitzed and he throws a check down and they're like, oh, Isaiah Bond's in the end zone. How is he to see that when he has 2 seconds? When he's not in tune with anybody because he hasn't played snaps with anybody. It's flat out coaching malpractice. That's what it is. It's organizational malpractice. It's negligence. He never had a chance to really begin with. And the good part about all this, the silver lining, is the fact that he's likely starting the next game against Las Vegas Raiders. Raiders, obviously a worse team than the Ravens. And he'll have a full week to practice with the starters, which he hasn't done since he was drafted. The fact that he hasn't practiced with the starters since he was drafted is crazy, considering the fact that it's been only him and Dillon Gabriel for the past couple weeks. Ever since Flacco was traded to the Bengals, it's been only him and Gabriel. And even prior to the Flacco trade, even when they had all the guys, when they had Kenny Pickett and Tyler Huntley and all of them, you still know it's not an ideal quarterback situation. And Shedeur is certainly a talented enough quarterback to be quarterback 1 on that team. So for him to not play with the starters at all since he was drafted is flat out malpractice. It's like, it's not crazy to say they don't want him to succeed, because they don't. So yeah, it was a bad game. I'll be the first to admit it. I think a lot of people in media are going to pile on him. Rex Ryan is obviously piling on him quite a lot. But give him 1 more week. Give him 1 more week. Give him 1 week to actually play under fair circumstances with 1 week of practicing with the starters. And if he has a bad game then I'll be like, oh, maybe Shedeur's not so good. But even 2 weeks is not enough, right? I don't even think it's enough to say, as flawed as he is, as much as I could criticize him, I don't even think it's that fair to say Dillon Gabriel's a terrible quarterback yet. He has obvious flaws. But 1 year is not telling of a full story. We have obviously seen that as Bills fans with Josh Allen. 1 week certainly isn't, unless it's Nathan Peterman. 1 week does not tell a full story, especially when you consider these circumstances. To make matters worse, his home was broken into during the game. Listen, I'm not the type to really sit here and talk about, what's going on in people's personal lives and things that happen. Like, he already had a bad night. I'm not going to be like, you know, starting conspiracies that the Browns organization robbed his house. I'm not doing all that. But I do ask that the media give him a little bit of grace. I know they won't, but I ask that the media give him a little grace and let him play a full game against the Raiders before they start this Shedeur is trash bandwagon. And that will conclude my third episode of the City of Good Sports podcast. Thank you as always for watching. This will be published on YouTube. Clips will be posted on Instagram. I think I'm going to create a TikTok soon. I still have to figure out Spotify. I still have to figure out Apple Podcasts. So this is obviously a work in progress, and I'm thankful for all the people that are supporting me early in this journey. And I'll be back next episode to talk about a whole new variety of topics. So thank you and have a great day.